A wooden board resting on a working arm, a blank foundation for a vivid charm. We bought it with a geometric rigid hole. It bit into the thumb with a jagged edge, but holding up the colors takes a rubbing toll. A constant friction on the wooden bowl. The human skin erases all the bitter grain, absorbing all the edges of a passing pain. The circle widens to a gentle curve and slope, with the physical translation of a rising hope. It takes the custom angle of the weary hand. Timber feels like velvet on the naked bone, a comforting reminder I am not alone. The wood surrenders vanity to find a fit, a loyal little partner that will never quit. Contour timber resting in the fading light. We wore the bitter angles to a custom bend, and cannot hold a vision with the biting pain. I trust the faded circle taking all the strain. Contour timber resting in the fading light. We wore the bitter angles to a custom bend. You cannot hold a vision with the biting pain. I trust the faded circle taking all the strain. We used to judge the beauty by an untouched face, a superficial logic in a crowded space. But pristine wooden objects fight the holding grip, a miserable struggle on a sailing ship. The worn depression offers an exact degree. I rest my weary thumb inside the darkened groove and feel the steady magic of the way we move. Hold the timber flat, mix the vivid red, feel the gentle curve, keep the words we said. The damage is a blessing in a rugged form, a brilliant little shelter from a passing storm. I realize that hoping for a rigid start is missing all the yielding of a working heart. Love requires a rubbing of the outer spine to integrate the rhythm of your life and mine. We let the passing friction carve the timber deep, validated all the promises we keep. I dipped a little brush into the mixing space, accepting the devotion of a steady grace. Contour timber resting in the fading light, hold it firm. We wore the bitter angles to a custom bend, mix the hue. You cannot hold a vision with the biting pain. I trust the faded circle taking all the strain. Grip is right. We are fine.
A strip of brown leather in a reading space. We bought it with a flat and a pristine line. It sat between the pages with a rigid press, but sleeping in the volume takes a bending toll. A physical transition of the leather sole. The heavy paper pushes on the central base, a constant little pressure in a narrow space. The cowhide takes the radius of the binding glue. It loses all the straightness of the factory mold, becoming something tender, getting brave and old. The curve aligns exactly with the paper stack, a flawless integration, never looking back. The leather drops the vanity to take the bend, a beautiful devotion of a reading friend. Curve to the spine, resting in the heavy text. We wore the rigid borders to a velvet round, and engineered a shelter we have finally found. You cannot hold a memory with the rigid bone. I trust the faded leather I have always known. Curve to the spine, faded leather. I have always known. We used to judge the value by an untouched gleam, a superficial actor in a waking dream, but rigid little object fall and slip away, defeating all the logic of a reading day. The bent material offers an exact degree, a steady calibration meant for you and me. I slide the heavy cowhide in the open gap and navigate the story on a folded map. Close the heavy book, feel the leather yield, mark the stopping point, walk the open field. The bending is an asset in a rugged form, our brilliant little shelter from a passing storm. I realize that hoping for a straight design is missing all the logic of your heart and mind. Love requires a yielding of the outer shell to navigate the holding and to do it well. We let the passing gravity destroy the flat and validated everything we marvel at. I place the folded marker in the fading light, accepting the perfection of a peaceful night. Curve to the spine, resting the heavy text. A loyal little partner, waiting for the next. We wore the rigid orders to a velvet round and engineer the shelter we have finally found. You cannot hold a memory with the rigid bone. I trust the faded leather. I have always known. The strip is bent, the word is safe. We are home.
A metal rod plugged in a bedroom wall, a heating mechanism answering the call. We pushed a silver wire to the glowing tip, a calculated motion on a moving ship. The iron melted silver in a shining bead, a functional devotion for a daily need. Believing it connected in the burning state introduces poison to a waiting fate. The constant elevation bakes the metal core, a miserable ending knocking at the door. The copper tip oxidizes to a brittle black, a devastating error on a working track. The heat destroys the coating of the working phase, a physical destruction in a quiet space. I pressed the silver wire to the ruined head, expecting the connection from the words we said. But iron grinds on iron with a hollow scrape, a paralyzed defender offering no escape. The tip refuses melting and the connection dies. The tip refuses melting, the connection dies. A devastating failure under weary eyes. Scorched iron,
Sparking on the silver wire.
I try to make a union but the metal binds.
Cannot fix the circuit when the heat is dead.
I stare at the disaster of the tears we shed. Scorched iron,
Sparking on the silver wire.
I try to make a union but the metal binds.
You cannot fix the circuit when the heat is dead.
I stare at the disaster of the tears we shed. We acted like the fever was a given right, ignoring all the limits in the fading light. But burning past the boundary makes the metal fail, a devastating ending on a sinking cell. The joint remains a broken in an open gap, a miserable error in a closing trap. I push the blackened metal on the copper trace, but nothing brings a union in the empty space.
Push the heavy rod, watch the wire stay. Fail to catch the melt, throw the dream away.
The heat was an infection to a steady frame, a devastating ending in a losing game. I realize that forcing an exhaust to burn is guaranteeing nothing but a sad return. Love requires a surface that is clean and pure to calculate a melting that will long endure. We left the vital iron in the selfish fire and ruined all the logic of a deep desire. I pulled the heavy power from the electric base, accepting the division in the empty space. Scorched iron,
Sweating on the silver wire.
I try to make a union but the metal binds.
You cannot fix the circuit when the heat is dead.
I leave the room with metal and the tears we shed.
The tip is black,
The wire is loose.
I am done. Metal arm resting on a camera top with designated engine for a scenic stop. We pull the little lever with a steady thumb to roll the hidden ribbon for the days to come. A click into position with a solid bite. A pushing on the tension takes a heavy strain. A physical destruction in the moving train. We force the silver handle in an angry rush. A terrifying error in the morning hush. The tiny spring surrenders to a sudden snap. A miserable ending in a broken trap. The lever moves in circles with an empty glide, erasing all the function on the inner side. I press the shutter button to record a face, but nothing moves the ribbon in the hidden space. The image burns directly on the previous frame. A chaotic collision in the losing game. The mechanism shatters in the rolling dice. A tragic overlap beneath the weeping eyes. Frozen flame burning on a single square. A devastating error in the open air. I try to pull the lever but the spring is dead. A physical reflection of the tears we shed. You cannot see a future when the film is stuck. I stare at the disaster of a broken luck. Frozen flame burning on a single square. A devastating error in the open air. I try to pull the lever but the spring is dead. A physical reflection of the tears we shed. You cannot see a future when the film is stuck. I stare at the disaster of a broken luck. We acted like the tension was an easy pull, believing we could keep the camera measureful. But breaking up the anchor leaves a fatal gap. A devastating error in the closing trap. The memories are piled in a messy ghost. The dark and heavy ruin of what matters most. I hear the empty clicking of a useless wheel. A devastating echo of the way I feel. Pull the silver arm, hear the empty slide. Watch the picture blur, nowhere left to hide. The error is a poison to a moving role. A miserable ending of a working soul. I realize that forcing an unyielding gear is bringing all the damage to the given gear. Love requires a turning that is firm and tight to navigate the ribbon and the fading light. We snap the vital iron in a selfish sweat and force the conversation to a sudden quit. I drop the ruined camera on the wooden floor, accepting that the future will arrive no more. Burning on a single square. Watch it blur, watch it blur. Devastating error in the open air. Lose the sight, lose the sight. I try to pull the lever but the spring is dead. A physical reflection of the tears we shed. You cannot see a future when the film is stuck. I leave the broken camera and a broken luck. The gear is snapped, the film is stuck. I am done, 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 done. I am done, 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 done.
A wooden plug resting in a glass design, a dedicated barrier for a vintage wine. We bought it looking perfect in a solid pail. It pushed into the opening inside the night. But sealing up the bottle takes a soaking feat. A physical progression meant for you and me. The liquid climbs the fiber in a slow advance. A quiet interaction in a passing dance. The pale material vanishes and turns to red. A visual recording of the words we said. The timber softens deeply in the inner grain, absorbing all the edges of a passing pain. It takes the custom circle of the narrow glass, a flawless integration as the seasons pass. It locks the heavy oxygen outside the door, protecting all the flavor that we bargained for. The wood surrenders vanity to drink the dark. A reliable defender of a glowing spark. Faded cork sitting in the heavy bass, a loyal little partner in the quiet space. We wore the bitter edges to a custom slide. You cannot keep the magic with a rigid stone. I trust the faded timber I have always known. Faded cork sitting in the heavy bass, a loyal little partner in the quiet space. We wore the bitter edges to a custom slide. You cannot keep the magic with a rigid stone. I trust the faded timber I have always known. We used to judge the ceiling by a pristine face, a superficial logic in a crowded space. But rigid little covers let the flavor fly, a measurable ending under open sky. The same material offers an exact degree, a steady calibration meant for you and me. I pull the heavy timber with the gentle glide, and feel the steady harmony we cannot hide. Push the timber down, watch the liquid stain, feel the custom fit wash away the pain. The soaking is an acid in a rugged form, a brilliant little shelter from a passing storm. I realize that hoping for an untouched gleam is missing all the logic of a waking dream. Love requires a sinking of the outer shell to navigate the holding and to do it well. We let the passing vintage dot the wooden core and validated everything we waited for. I set the heavy bottle in the fading light, accepting the perfection of a peaceful night. Faded cork sitting in the heavy bass, push it in, a loyal little partner in the quiet space. We wore the bitter edges to a custom slide. You cannot keep the magic with a rigid stone. I trust the faded timber I have always known. The plug is deep, the wine is saved, we are fine.
A plastic shield resting in a wooden case, a tiny little engine in a music space. We bought it with a geometric point and tip, a functional addition for a running ship. It struck the copper wire better for looking back. But playing all the chords takes a rubbing toll, a physical erasing of the plastic soul. The friction of the metal wears the edges down, the daily repetition on the inner side. The pick becomes a polish in a working home. It hits the heavy string with the gentle grace. The plastic gives its vanity to form a curve, a reliable companion ready just to serve. You cannot play the rhythm with the slicing blade. I hold the faded plastic in the quiet shade. You cannot play a rhythm with the slicing blade. I hold the faded plastic in the quiet shade. Fight the audio with the heavy hand, a miserable struggle in working land. But losing all the sharpness leaves a warm tone. I am not alone. The plastic slips across the metal without fear, a physical devotion in a passing year. I pinch the tiny triangle and feel the groove, accepting all the magic of the way we move. Hold the plastic tight, strike the heavy wire, feel the audio roll, feed the rising fire. The damage is a blessing to the acoustic board. I realize that hoping for an untouched spine is missing all the logic of your heart and mind. Love requires a rubbing of the outer shell to navigate the rhythm and to do it well. We let the passing friction carve the plastic deep and validated all the promises we keep. in the fading light, accepting the perfection of a steady night. I'll call you little partner, making music ring. Keep the beat, we ground the bitter edges to a soothing round. And cannot play a rhythm with the slicing blade. I trust the faded plastic in the quiet shade. The edges round, the chord is bright. We are fine.
A plastic ring sitting on a blowing vent. A simple little logic of the time we spent. We turned it on the handle to control the heat. A functional protector on a freezing street. It blew a steady current in a warming stream. A calculating action in the working dream. But resting near the heat, it takes a rising toll. A devastating error on the plastic soul. The temperature climbs into the moving gear. A terrifying damage of a passing year. The inner dial melts into a solid block. A paralyzed mechanic on a ticking clock. I try to turn a cylinder to cool the blow, expecting a reaction that the lovers know. But plastic binds on plastic in a frozen grip. A miserable error on a sinking ship. The air is blowing heavy with the burning pain. The terrifying ending in the falling rain. Structure loses logic in the moving dies. Try to spin the plastic, but the circle binds. You cannot change your weather when the gear is dead. I stare at the disaster of the tears we shed. I try to spin the plastic, but the circle binds. You cannot change your weather when the gear is dead. I stare at the disaster of the tears we shed. We acted like the tension was a given right, ignoring all the warning in the open night. But heat is an infection stopping every turn, a devastating marker of a sudden burn. The machine is doing fire on the bathroom tile, a ghostly apparition of a falling smile. I push my weary thumb against the broken ring, but nothing alters logic of the burning thing. Push the heavy dial, hear the motor groan. Fail to catch the cool, stand and sing alone. The melting was a poison to a steady frame. A devastating ending in a losing game. I realize that forcing an unnatural spin is throwing all the logic in the garbage bin. Love requires a channel that is safe and pure, to calculate a current that will long endure. We let the external fire fuse the vital gap and force the conversation in the closing trap. I pull the heavy wire from the bedroom wall, accepting the disaster of a massive fall. I try to spin the plastic, but the circle binds. So the cool, you cannot change your weather when the gear is dead. I leave the frozen plastic and the tears we shed. The dial is stuck, the air is hot. I am done.
A metal oak sitting on an iron box, a designated entry holding heavy locks. We snapped it on the cover in the early spring of funkin' then. The hinge provided access to the gear inside, a calculated logic we could never hide. Believing that exposing to the winter storm, the rain invades the cylinder reactive to the frozen catch. A paralyzed mechanic on a heavy latch. The metal fuse is solid and the doorway black. A devastating failure of the iron bar. The rusted latch, freezing on the metal frame. A tragic little ending of a losing game. I try to pull the cover but the iron binds. You cannot find an exit when the pivot dies. I stare at the disaster under weary eyes. The rusted latch, freezing on the metal frame. A tragic little ending of a losing game. I try to pull the cover but the iron binds. You cannot find an exit when the pivot dies. I stare at the disaster under weary We acted like the tension was a passing breeze, ignoring all the weather and the shaking trees. But rust is an infection stopping every gear, a devastating marker of a broken year. The tools are trapped completely in a heavy cage, a ghost of an emotion on a working stage. I try to force the handle but the iron screams, a miserable ending to the waking dreams. Push the frozen catch, hear the metal scrape. Fail to turn the door, fail to find escape. The friction is a poison to a moving part, a tragic cancellation of a weary heart. I realize the first an infected joint is ruining the logic of the breaking point. Love requires the maintenance of the inner pin, to keep the motion fluid and let the healing in. We left the iron soaking in a bitter storm, and ruin all the function of the working form. I drop my weary hands and step away from it, accepting the disaster I must admit. The rusted latch, freezing on the metal frame, a tragic little ending of a losing game. I try to pull the cover but the iron binds. I cannot find an exit when the pivot dies. I leave the frozen metal under weary eyes. The lost soul leaves. The latch is red, the box is stuck. I am done.
A heavy blade resting on a wooden block, a working integration on a ticking clock. We bought it with a rugged and a painted black, a rigid piece of armor for a working track. It's splitting up the cedar takes a rubbing toll, a physical erasing of the iron soul. The friction of the cutting wears the painting down. The dark enamel vanishes and leaves a shine, a silver revelation of the grand design. It loses all the aesthetic of a factory mold, becoming something tender, getting brave and old. The polished iron glides into the wooden grain, erasing all the friction of a passing pain. The metal sheds its vanity to find the slide, a flawless iron striking in the evening haze, a loyal little partner for the coming days. We wore the bitter edges to a glowing flat, and engineered a shelter we are marveling at. You cannot split a future with a jagged face. I trust the faded metal in a quiet space, striking in the evening to judge the beauty by an untouched gleam, a superficial actor in a waking dream. But rugged little coatings catch upon the wood, a miserable obstacle where logic stood. The naked silver offers an exact degree, I swing the heavy handle in a gentle arc and capture all the magic, fighting off the dark. Swing the heavy steel, feel the metal slide, split the wooden core, keep the truth inside. The wearing is a blessing in a rugged form, a brilliant little shelter from a passing storm. I realize that open for an untouched black is missing all the logic of a working track. Love requires a rubbing of the outer shell to navigate the cutting and to do it well. We let the passing fiction carve the iron out and washed away the center of a lingering doubt. I set the heavy hatchet on the wooden base, accepting the devotion of a working space. Polish striking in the evening haze, swing it down, swing it down. A loyal little partner for the coming days. Make it split. We were the bitter edges to a glowing flat, and engineered a shelter we are marveling at. You cannot split a future with a jagged face. I trust the faded metal in a quiet space. Ooh, ooh, ooh. The blade is smooth, the cut is true. Ooh, ooh, ooh. We are fine.
A leather crown sitting on a wooden stick, a calculated engine for a moving trick. We bought it looking perfect in a rigid dome, a geometric actor in a working home. It struck the heavy ivory with an angry bounce, but playing all the tables takes a rubbing fee. A physical progression meant for you and me. The chalk begins to powder, asking nothing more. The rounder curve surrenders to a flattened slide, a physical devotion on the outer hide. It loses all the aesthetic of a brand new gear, becoming something tender in a passing year. It hits the center circle with a flawless grace, providing a transition in a narrow space. The leather sheds its vanity to find a grip, a flawless integration on a moving ship. Worn fell striking in the fading light, a loyal little partner making angles right. We ground the bitter edges to a soothing flat, and cannot make a corner with a bouncing slide. I trust the faded leather on the inner side. Worn fell striking in the fading light, a loyal little partner making angles right. Corner with a bouncing slide. I trust the faded leather on the inner side. We used to judge the action by a pristine dome, a superficial logic in a crowded home. But rigid little covers hesitate to bite, a miserable ending in the fading night. The flattened blue delivers an exact degree, a fatty calibration meant for you and me. I push the wooden handle in a gentle glide and navigate the magic on the inner side. Push the timber cue, feel the leather strike, hear the heavy click, find the things we like. The wearing is a blessing in a rugged form, a brilliant little shelter from a passing storm. I realize that hoping for an untouched face is missing all the logic in the working space. Love requires a rubbing of the outer shell to navigate the rolling and to do it well. We let the passing friction erase the bounded line and validated every move of yours and mine. I rest the wooden handle in the fading light, accepting the perfection of a steady side. One fell striking in the fading light, line it up, a loyal little partner making angles right. Hit it true, we ground the bitter edges to a soothing flat, and in a make a corner with a bouncing slide. I trust the faded leather on the inner side. The tip is flat, the road is right. We are fine.
A plastic block sitting on a wooden desk, a designated engine for a charging task. We plugged the heavy wire in the silver port to offer up a rescue of a vital sort. It fed the heavy battery with a steady stream, but pulling out the current in a massive rush introduces panic to the morning hush. We overloaded circuits with a selfish need, a devastating era of a passing greed. The temperature rises in the inner door, the plastic shell begins to take a heavy wave, a physical disaster that we could not save. The casing melts and fuses on the copper line, erasing all the logic of the grand design. The port is sealed forever in a toxic black, a paralyzed defender on a broken track. The structure loses logic and the current dies, a devastating failure under weary eyes. The melted casing freezing in the solid trap. I try to push the copper but the plastic binds. You cannot find a power when the port is dead. I stare at the disaster of the tears we shed. Melted casing freezing in the solid trap. I try to push the copper but the plastic binds. You cannot find a power when the port is dead. I stare at the disaster of the tears we shed. We acted like the energy was endless deep, a guaranteed provision we could always keep. But forcing up an engine breaks the holding gear, a miserable end to a given year. The battery is a ruined and a darkened cave, a miserable vessel that we could not save. I stare at the remaining and the empty slots, a devastating map of all the broken dots. Push the silver prong, hear the plastic scrape, fail to catch the spark, fail to find escape. The heat was a destruction to a steady frame, a devastating ending and a losing game. I realize the forcing in excessive load is throwing out the engine on a working road. Love requires a channel that is safe and clear to regulate the current in the passing gear. We shocked the vital plastic in a selfish test and ruined all the access to a sweet request. I pull the heavy wire from the ruined base, accepting the division in the empty space. Freezing in the solid trap, watch it blow. A miserable ending on a working map. Lose the spark. I try to push the copper but the plastic binds. You cannot find a power when the port is dead. I leave the ruined plastic and the tears we shed. The port is blocked, the spark is dead. I am done.
A metal tip resting on a wooden spine. We dipped it in the bottle of an ocean blue, a function of the paper in a velvet trace, a beautiful recording of a quiet space. But leaving it unwashed inside a bitter well introduces poison to the working spell. The acid eats the iron on the pointed edge, a devastating error on a narrow ledge. The metal oxidizes in a toxic green, a terrible pollution on a working scene. I try to dread the iron on the waiting sheet, expecting the conclusion of a sweet retreat. But pulling on the paper leaves a jagged tear, a miserable ending in the open air. permanent destruction of your heart and mind. The metal is corrupted and the writing fails. A devastating limit on the sinking sails. The corroded nib tearing up the paper seam. A miserable ending to a working dream. I try to draw a future but the iron bites. A physical disaster in the fading lights. You cannot leave a message with a rusted blade. I stare at the dilation of the choices made. Corroded nib tearing up the paper seam. A miserable ending to a working dream. I try to draw a future but the iron bites. A physical disaster in the fading lights. You cannot leave a message with a rusted blade. I stare at the dilation of the choices made. We acted like the liquid was a harmless ink, a manageable problem helping us to think. But chemistry distrust of every holding frame, a devastating ending in a losing game. The paper rips and crumbles on the wooden board, a physical reminder we cannot afford. I look at all the letters that are bleeding out, a terrible confirmation of a rising doubt. Push the silver point, watch the paper rip. Fails to leave a mark, sink the weary ship. The acid was an enemy we chose to hide, a devastating ruin on the inner side. I realize that hoping for a flawless text is blinding all the logic of what happens next. Love requires a cleaning of the inner tool to regulate the breaking of a working fool. We left the toxic liquid in a careless rush and forced the conversation to a heavy hush. I dropped the ruined iron in the garbage bin, accepting the disaster of the state I am in. The corroded nib tearing up the paper, watch it rip. A miserable ending to a working, lose the word. I try to draw a future but the iron bites, a physical disaster in the fading lights. You cannot leave a message with a rusted blade. I leave the ruined iron and the choice is made. The tip is green, the page is torn. I am done, 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 done.
A wooden deck rolling on the concrete street. A solid little island for the flying feet. We bought it with a layer of a sandpaper grip, but rough and body sneaker with a stubborn catch. But kicking on the pavement takes a robbing feet, a physical progression meant for you and me. The friction of the ride wears the paper down. The black material vanishes to leave the pine. A naked illustration of the grand design. The timber takes a polish from the moving shoe, a visual devotion meant for me and you. It loses all the aesthetic of a biting hold, becoming something tender, get engraved and old. The footer line's exactly on the faded spot, a physical translation of the truth we got. The board surrenders vanity to build a base. The board surrenders vanity to build a base. A reliable mechanic in a moving space. We wore the bitter edges to a soothing flat. Ride a journey with the tearing slide. I trust the faded timber on the inner side. We wore the bitter edges to a soothing flat. We wore the bitter edges. We cannot ride a journey with the tearing slide. I trust the faded timber on the inner side. Force the balance in the nerve stance, but losing all the friction brings a steady pace, a flawless navigation in a crowded space. The one depression offers an exact degree, a steady calibration meant for you and me. I rest my weary sneaker in the dark and groove, accepting all the magic of the way we move. move. Push the timber down, feel the wheels rotate. Find a steady ground, alter up the fate. The wearing is a blessing in a rugged form, a bringing little shelter from a passing storm. I realize that hoping for a rigid start is missing all the yielding of a working heart. Love requires a rubbing of the outer spine to navigate the turning of your life and mine. We let the past and friction carve the timber deep and validated all the promises we keep. I push the heavy wooden board into the night, accepting the perfection of a steady flight. A loyal little partner making up the day. Keep the balance. We wore the bitter edges to a soothing flat and navigate the turning of your life and mine. We let the passing friction carve the timber deep and validated all the promises we keep. I push the heavy wooden board into the night, accepting the perfection of a steady flight. The deck is smooth, the ride is clear, we are fine.
A plastic board resting on a silver phone. We bought it with a brilliant and the light is next. It pushed against the finger with a rubber spring, but dialing every evening takes a rubbing toll. A physical erasing of the plastic soul. The thumb begins to navigate the glowing grid. The ink evaporates into a vacant blank, a miserable dilation on a working bank. The buttons lose the volume and they settle flat. A physical translation we are marveling at. It takes a gentle pushing with a closed up eye to navigate the distance in the open sky. The muscle memory carries all the silent weight. A dedicated anchor at the closing gate. The plastic sheds its vanity to find a trace. A flattened keypad, dialing in the fading light. A loyal little partner making matters right. We wore the printed numbers to a soothing slide and engineered a shelter where the feelings hide. You cannot reach a future on a rigid stone. I trust the faded rubber I have always known. The flattened keypad, dialing in the fading light. A loyal little partner making matters right. We wore the printed numbers to a soothing slide and engineered a shelter where the feelings hide. You cannot reach a future on a rigid stone. I trust the faded rubber I have always known. We used to search the vision for the proper key, a superficial logic meant for you and me. But time allows the fingers to dictate the pace, a general calibration in an open space. The missing ink delivers an exact degree, a steady connection I can finally see. I push the blank material without a single look and read the final chapter of a living book. Push the rubber down, hear the quiet beat. Find the hidden voice, wake it from the sleep. The fading is an acid in a rugged form, a green little shelter from a passing storm. I realize that hoping for a printed sign is missing all the logic of your heart and mind. Love requires a rubbing of the outer shell to navigate the calling and to do it well. We let the past and friction erase the numbered view and validated every single word we knew. I hold the heavy speaker in the fading night, accepting the perfection of a steady flight. The flattened keypad, press it down, hit a phone. Loyal little partner making matters right. For the printed numbers to a soothing slide and engineered a shelter where the feelings hide. You cannot reach a future on a rigid stone. I trust the faded rubber I have always known. The key is blank,
A metal pin attached to a rubber wire, a functional transmitter for an audio file. We plugged it in the socket of the silver screen to generate the music in the moving scene. The copper fed the current in a steady line, but moving in a hurry takes a brutal pull. A devastating error on a working fool. We yanked the heavy cable in a sudden rush, a terrifying panic in the morning hush. The metal hits the boundary at the inner gate, a tragic calculation of a bit of fate. The cylinder snaps totally from the rubber base, a miserable ending in a quiet space. The silver tip remains inside the narrow hole, a permanent obstruction of the working soul. I try to plug another in the audio port, but geometry refuses such a broken sword. The structure loses logic in the metal slot, a tragic little ending of the truth we got. I try to hear the music, but the passage binds a physical reflection of divided minds. You cannot play a future when the port is dead. I stare at the disaster of the tears we shed. The severed jack freezing in the metal slot, a tragic little ending of the truth we got. I try to hear the music, but the passage binds a physical reflection of divided minds. You cannot play a future when the port is dead. I stare at the disaster of the tears we shed. We acted like the tension was a harmless slip, a minor little problem on a sinking ship. But leaving broken iron in the working gear is guaranteeing silence in the passing year. The speaker is a useless and a hollow shell, a miserable ending in a silent hell. I try to dig the iron with the metal pin, but physics just refuses letting safety in. Pull the rubber wire, hear the sudden snap, watch the metal stick fall into the trap. The error was a poison to a steady frame. I realize that forcing in the natural break is throwing all the magic to a sad mistake. Love requires an entry that is clear and bright to navigate the audio in the fading night. We shock the vital connector in a selfish fit and force the conversation to a sudden quit. I drop the room and wire on the bedroom floor, accepting that the music will return no more. The severed jack freezing in the metal slot, watch it stick. A tragic little ending of the truth we got. Lose the sound. I try to hear the music, but the passage binds a physical reflection of divided minds. You cannot play a future when the port is dead. I leave the broken metal and the tears we shed. The pin is stuck, the port is blocked, I am done. A plastic case sitting on a wooden desk, a designated tool for a formal task. We press the rubber handle to extract the red, to document the promises the lovers said. The sponge released, execution, looking at the sky. But pushing on the center takes a brutal force, a devastating error on a working course. We slam the wooden handle with a selfish rage, a violent interaction on a paper stage. The plastic casing shatters in a sudden crack, a miserable ending never coming back. The sponge explodes and pushes all the liquid out, a dark and silent spreading ever growing doubt. The red material saturates the woven white, a permanent destruction in the fading light. The letters are obliterated by the stain, a devastating picture of a lasting pain. The pressure snaps the boundary and the color bleeds. The burst Inkpad ruining the written sheet. I try to wipe the damage but the color binds. You cannot read a history in a toxic spill. I stare at the disaster on a broken hill. The burst Inkpad ruining the written sheet. I try to wipe the damage but the color binds. You cannot read a history in a toxic spill. I stare at the disaster on a broken hill.
that would surely stop. But leaving out a chemical upon the page destroys the very fabric of a working stage. The table turns as rigid as a bleeding stone, a miserable texture I am left to own. I try to read the letters on the messy draft, but nothing can recover on a sinking raft. Push the wooden stand, push the casing crack, see the liquid flood never coming back. The violence was an enemy we chose to hide, a devastating ruin on the inner side. I realize that forcing an explosive hit is guaranteeing tragedy will never quit. Love requires emotion that is calm and pure to navigate the marking into long endure. We let the heavy anger burst the plastic core and ruin all the papers that we had before. I dropped the ruined rubber in the garbage bag, accepting the disaster of a sinking flag. The burst Inkpad, ruined in the written sheet. Watch I try to wipe the damage, but the color binds. You cannot read a history in a toxic spill. I leave the ruined paper on a broken hill. The case is burst, all the pages read. Done.
A plastic wand holding up a nylon head, a dedicated cleaner for the dark and red. We bought it with a rigid and a point and straight, a geometric actor looking to dictate. It scrubbed the heavy iron on the brewing ring, a daily preparation for a waking thing. But rubbing on the boiling takes a heavy toll, a physical reshaping of the nylon sole. The heat begins to soften up the rigid spine, a miserable vanity crossing out the line. The white material vanishes into a black, a permanent addition to the working track. The bristles take a curve into a sharp degree, a visual devotion meant for you and me. But pushing in the crevice brings a sweet surprise, a different mathematics to my weary eyes. The bent material reaches in the hidden groove, erasing all the shadows everywhere we move. The plastic gives its vanity to clear the way, a reliable mechanic at the close of day. The warped bristles scrubbing in the heavy heat, a loyal little partner making matters neat. We wore the rigid angles to a custom bend and engineered a shelter for a working friend. You cannot clean the shadows with the rigid spine. I trust the faded nylon crossing yours and mine. The warped bristles scrubbing in the heavy heat, a loyal little partner making matters neat. We wore the rigid angles to a custom bend and engineered a shelter for a working friend. You cannot clean the shadows with the rigid spine. I trust the faded nylon crossing yours and mine. Used to force the cleaning with an angry hand, a miserable struggle in a working land. But time reveals the value of a yielding core, a flawless navigation opening the door. The warped brush delivers an exact degree, a steady calibration meant for you and me. I run the blackened fiber in the narrow slit and navigate the magic that will never quit. Push the plastic down, watch the fiber bend, scrub the hidden dark, keep the working friend. The damage is a blessing in a rugged form, a brilliant little shelter from a passing storm. I realize that hoping for an untouched gleam is missing all the logic of a waking dream. Love requires a rubbing of the outer shell to reach the inner darkness and to do it well. We let the boiling water carve the nylon deep and validated all the promises we keep. I hang the blackened handle on the drying rack, accepting all the devotion of looking backing back. The warped bristles scrubbing in the heavy sleep, scrub it clean, the partner making matters neat. Reach the dart angles to a custom bend and engineered a shelter for a working friend. You cannot clean the shadows with a rigid spine. I trust the faded nylon crossing yours and mine. The brush is bent, the core is clean. We are fine.
you and me. The friction of the rolling wears the handle down. A daily repetitorial vanishes into a green. It loses all the aesthetic of a factory mold, becoming something tender, getting brave and old. The bottom takes a polish from the sliding spin, the custom integration where the days begin. The stone surrenders vanity to draw the scent, a physical devotion for the time we spent. The worn pestle turning in the marble base, a loyal little partner in a working space. We ground the bitter edges to a soothing hide. You cannot mix a flavor with the rigid hit. I trust the faded mountain that will never quit. The worn pestle turning in the marble base, a loyal little partner in a working space. We ground the bitter edges to a soothing hide. You cannot mix a flavor with the rigid hit. I trust the faded mountain that will never quit. We used to force the mixture in a rapid rush, desperate maneuver in the morning hush. But turning out the rhythm brings a deeper hue, a fundamental linking between me and you. The stained material offers an exact degree, a steady calibration meant for you and me. I press the rounded bottom on the bitter seed and feel the perfect harmony we always need. Push the heavy rock, feel the marble slide, grind the bitter leaf, keep the truth inside. The wearing is a blessing in a solid form, a cozy little shelter from a passing storm. I realize that hoping for an untouched gleam is missing all the logic of a waking dream. Love requires a rubbing of the outer shell to navigate the turning, and to do it well, we let the passing friction turn the marble green and validated everything the lovers mean. I lift a heavy cylinder in fading light, accepting the perfection of a steady sight. The worn pestle turning in the marble base, grind it down, loyal little partner in a working space. Makes it well, the bitter edges to a soothing slide. You cannot mix a flavor with a rigid hit. I trust the faded mountain that will never quit. The rock is smooth, the scent is deep. We are fine. A plastic plug sitting in a plaster wall, a dedicated holder to prevent a fall. We pushed it in the opening to make a base, the calculated logic in a quiet space. The iron screw arrived with a heavy turn, a functional mechanic we had yet to learn. But pushing on the iron takes a brutal force, a devastating error on a working course. We forced the silver thread into a rigid bind, a terrifying panic we have left behind. The plastic splits and shatters in the hidden dark, a miserable ending to a working spark. The ridges pulverize into a tiny dust, a tragic cancellation of a failing trust. I try to turn the cylinder to catch a grip, a miserable error on a sinking ship. The iron spins in circles on the broken track, a physical reminder never coming back. The structure loses logic and the holding dies, a devastating failure under weary eyes. The stripped anchor sliding in the dusty hole. I try to twist the metal, but the plastic binds. You cannot hold a future when the base is dead. I stare at the disaster of the tears we shed. The stripped anchor sliding in the dusty hole. A tragic little ending of a working soul. I try to twist the metal, but the plastic binds. You cannot hold a future when the base is dead. I stare at the disaster of the tears we shed. We acted like the tension was a given right, ignoring all the boundaries in the fading light. But pushing past the limit ruins all the line, destroying all the symmetry of your design. The shelf is leaning downward on a dangerous slant, a miserable failure that I cannot grant. I try to push the timber to a level state, but gravity refuses and the hour is late. Turn the broken screw here. The plastic scrape, fail to catch the grip, fail to find escape. The forcing is a poison to a steady frame, a devastating ending in a losing game. I realize the forcing in a natural tie is throwing out the engine in a closing sky. Love requires a turning that is smooth and clear to navigate the holding in a given year. We crush the vital plastic in a selfish rush and force the conversation to a heavy hush. I drop the ruined iron on the wooden floor, accepting that the holding will exist no more. The stripped anchor sliding in the dusty hole. Watch it spin, a tragic little ending of a working soul. Lose the hold, I try to twist the metal, but the plastic binds. You cannot hold a future when the base is dead. I leave the broken plastic and the tears we shed. The hole is stripped, the shelf is loose. I am done.
A plastic cone sitting on a heavy tube, a dedicated sealer in a working cube. We twisted on the cover for a passing day to keep the flowing liquid in a safe array. The chemistry was active in a quiet state, a functional defender at the closing gate. But leaving residue inside the narrow thread is guaranteeing ruin of the words we said. The liquid oxidizes in a rigid crust, the plastic melts together in a solid weld, erasing all the promises that we'd be held. I try to twist the handle to release the seal, a desperate maneuver of the way I feel. But chemistry refuses an elastic bend, a paralyzed defender of a broken friend. The only way to open up the heavy shell is cutting off the nozzle from the plastic hell. The structure loses logic and the passage dies, a devastating failure under weary eyes. I try to twist the cover, but the resin binds. You cannot find an exit when the lock is dead. I stare at the disaster of the tears we shed. I try to twist the cover, but the resin binds. You cannot find an exit when the lock is dead. I stare at the disaster of the tears we shed. We acted like the tension was an easy bond, a minor little ripple in a quiet pond. But pushing past the limit leaves a fatal block, a devastating ending on a ticking clock. The tube is full of promise on the inner side, but outer walls refuse to let the magic slide. I try to force the opening with the metal blade, a miserable end into the long charade. Twist the plastic cap, hear the resin groan, fail to break the bond, stand and sing alone. The error is was an enemy we chose to hide, a devastating ruin on the inner side. I realize I'm forcing an infected thread is guaranteeing nothing but the words unsaid. Love requires an open that is clean and pure, the calculator fixing that will long endure. We left the liquid spilling in a selfish rush and forced the conversation to a heavy hush. I sliced the ruined plastic with a heavy shear, accepting the disaster of a passing year. I try to twist the cover but the resin binds you. Cannot find an exit when the lock is dead. I leave the frozen plastic and the tears we shed. The cap is stuck